Wednesdays, I've been sending out and letting you know that for the next several weeks, we're going to focus on a book, which we don't always do. It's not something that we've done once or twice. I shared the book. I've challenged you, particularly the leaders in the church, to get this book. Had the opportunity to get to hear the author herself share this information with us a couple of years back. And I was rereading it several months ago, as I said, and realized that I just knew that the Lord was sharing that this was not about youth, this is about us. This is about a church. This is about a church who this morning has very small numbers, and yet just a few years ago had a little larger, and we tend to go on those swings, on the ups and the downs, and we tend to see maybe an average attendance increase at Dorsey, and maybe it slides here, or it increases here and it slides there. And so what is God calling us to do? And in the next several months, we here at Wesley are going to be addressing a lot of that. In fact, it's one of the challenges that in my annual interview with the district superintendent was made clear that apparently based on some situations here and evaluating us, as the conference does, that they're going to challenge us, that they'll be sending someone down to work with us and trying to decide where we're going and how we're going to get there. And in doing that, sort of like me starting the prayer team, which is sometimes difficult here because everybody's getting here at the last minute because it's so daggum early on a Sunday. And at Dorsey, I don't get to pray with the worship team because they've already started when I'm going to get there. But this book is not a novel. It's actually a textbook. It actually takes time to highlight a research study. And for those of us who have had to read those kind of things in our job, particularly those of us who've been teachers and having to read some of that stuff, we kind of think, well, it has nothing to do with real life. It's just research. And yet Ken Dean really does a great job of bringing this to our attention and where we are. I mean, if we were really honest with ourselves, when we look at the church of our parents, if we were a child who grew up in the church, and there are many generations who did not, or if we had the opportunity to even look at the church of our grandparents, and I don't mean the building, I mean the people, I mean the beliefs, the way things were done, the church has changed. So the question is, has the church changed and become more biblical or less biblical? And the National Survey for Youth and Religion seem to feel like, as many of us do, those young people, they want nothing to do with the church. What is wrong with those people? Why can't they be like us old people? Well, the scary thing is, to make a long story short as we open, is that the study shows that they're exactly what we created. The study is showing that young people, and we're not talking 10-year-olds, we're talking young adults, late teenagers, are basically demonstrating the Christianity that we passed on. But maybe this most important thing that I really think is, I think as we as a church, having been here now for just short of 8 years, because I started in mid-year, been at Dorsey for 6. I'm at that point that I need to start reviewing where I came from, what our purposes were when we got together, and say, why is it that we seem to get just so far and can't get past? And my challenge is, as I was rereading this, I think she hits it on the head. I think we get as far as we allow our faith and our trust in Christ to take us. In the last couple of months, at our group of pastors who meet for breakfast in the morning, we got talking about things, and the last time we went to a new restaurant down in Odenton, we walked in, and the first pastor who was there, he sat down, and the guy beside him, his Bible was open at the table, and he was there reading and doing his prayer time. And then the three of us, are sitting there and making a lot of noise. We're not real quiet. And then before we left, a couple stops us at the door, and they stop us at the door to talk to us that they are up there tending to a family member young family member who's just been in a horrific automobile accident and will probably never recover, and asked us right in the middle of the restaurant to pray with them. This idea of a living, active faith is what drives the church. A friend and colleague of mine right there, right up the road at St. Mark United Methodist is Pastor Herb Watson. And Herb says he has Holy Communion after every meeting, particularly after church council. He said because in the body of Christ we should be allowed to disagree. We should be allowed to challenge whether, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're going to put green carpet in the church. Oh my gosh, they're going to change the color. Or whatever the case is, or the challenges that face us. He said, but in the end, we walk out the body of Christ. These were the things that I said, maybe these things we need to focus on, and yet, many of us think we're very Christian. And yet, according to Ken Christine, we're sort of Christian-ish. And sometimes that's offensive to us. Because how dare her tell me what I learned from my grandmother, great-grandmother, grandfather, whatever it is, on down the line, that our traditions aren't really Christian. Of the many things that Dean's book highlights, she says that there are things outside of Christianity that have creeped into Christianity. Now that's not always bad. I mean, that's sort of like saying, yeah, that daggum music that they're listening to now. See, if they never let that in the church, we'd still be singing all the old hymns, and everything would be fine. That wasn't the point. It was more the attack, not how we worship, but what and who we worship. And sometimes our multiculturalism brings in a lot of things that we're not willing to sort through. But the book focuses, and it says that basically what we've ended up with, these are her words, it is an adherence to a do-good, feel-good spirituality and has little to do with the triune God of Christian tradition, and even less to do with loving Jesus enough to follow him into the world. Now, you know what's even more interesting? The title of the book comes from a sermon, and not one that was preached yesterday. It comes from a sermon that was actually preached by John Wesley and George Whitefield. Not the same sermon. It was during the Great Awakening in England, where it appeared that everybody had so much going on. You know, there was lots of art, and there were jobs, and there was plenty of good stuff. And it seems like every time the church gets to a period of lots of good stuff, some of that good, not so good stuff creeps into what we believe and don't believe. Said Wesley was discouraged, he said, but not defeated. His whole purpose in preaching the thing was to persuade people to get busy about the endeavor to become altogether Christian, not an almost a Christian. Said Wesley had several questions in this sermon, and they were pretty daunting. He said, do you desire nothing but God? Are you happy in God? Some of us are going, I'm rarely happy anytime. Is he your glory, your delight, your crown of rejoicing? Do you love your neighbor as yourself? Do you love every man, even your enemies, even the enemies of God, as your own soul, as Christ loved you? So today we read a story from the Old Testament that at this point you may be going, not sure how that ties in or what that amounts to. But you have to understand that as we look at this, we go back and look at these verses again, that the major ownership that you had as a male, unfortunately, in that society was your birthright. The firstborn got it whether they deserved it or not. It came by the order in which they were born. That's it. That's how you got it, and you were entitled to everything. And if we look back to what Justin read, and we look at those verses again and listen to what this amounted to. Starting in verse 27, it says, as the boys grew up, Esau became a skillful hunter, the hunter. He was an outdoorsman. But Jacob, on the other hand, was the quiet kid. He kind of sat and he studied and he thought, well, actually, Jacob's idea, in Jacob's mind, he probably connived and planned to cheat, because Jacob was not always concerned about anybody other than himself. Isaac loved Esau because he enjoyed eating the wild game that Esau brought home, but Rebekah, the mom, loved Jacob. Then one day, said Jacob was cooking stew, and Esau arrived home from the wilderness exhausted and hungry. Now, understand, it wasn't like a hunting trip in Maryland where he drove in his air-conditioned car or truck, came back home, spent a few hours out, was really comfortable, got Under Armour to wick away all the nasty sweat. Didn't know. He said he was gone for days at a time. Yes, he was tired. Now, the chances are he probably was not near death. All right? However, as we listen, Esau kind of makes it sound like it's really awful. And so Jacob was cooking his stew, and Esau arrives home from the wilderness, exhausted and hungry. And Esau says to Jacob, man, I'm starved. Give me some of that red stew. I need some of that good, meaty stew. And this is how Esau got his other name. Then in verse 31, then Jacob says, all right, I'll do that. Remember, Jacob's the quiet one, who I also said was kind of the conniving one. But trade me your rights as the firstborn son. For stew. I mean, he was the hunter. You see a little bit of irony here? The hunter was trading his birthright to someone who could cook what he had captured. Wow. And Esau says in 32, he says, look, I'm dying of starvation. What good is my birthright now? Now, Esau, are you really dying of starvation? I mean, you seem to be doing okay here. There is food here. You are back home. If there's not food there, there's probably food to be had or made. But no. He wanted it now. And he wanted it right then. And Jacob said, but first you must swear that your birthright is mine. So Esau swore an oath, thereby selling all his rights as the firstborn to his brother. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and lentil stew. Esau ate. Then he got up. He showed contempt for his rights as the firstborn. That in and of itself was an insult to your family, an insult to the community. Your birthrights weren't worth any more than a bowl of stew. But what he wanted is he wanted it then, he wanted it now. He said, what did he want? He wanted comfort, he wanted convenience, and he wanted his personal satisfaction. And if that meant giving up his birthright, big deal. I'll just go out and I'll hunt and I'll live my life and everything will be fine. I don't know about you, but I'm beginning to hear a little American story here. Just give me what I want now. Whatever, I'll just get more later. There's more down the road. It's really not a big deal. I'll just trade it off because right now I want food. And if I want it now, I'm going to get it now. And if I got to trade something off to make him happy, what do I care? That's what generations ago began doing. According to Dean, we did that with our churches. We did that with the gospel of Christ. We began giving pieces of it away to keep people happy in the moment. Now, that may be really uncomfortable, particularly when we look back, but what I will tell you is I truly believe that most of the older generation who may have taught us, for most of us who did it not knowing, we actually had no idea it was really happening. It's like the frog in the pan. You just turn it up a little bit at a time, and it becomes more and more acceptable. And then we wonder why in 2016 or 2012 when the book was actually written, that generations of young folks go, I don't see any difference in the church than I see at my school. they're all sort of the same. They all do good stuff. That's the point that we're sitting at. We're at that point. How are we any different? This morning at each church, I said we prayed as a worship team. We need to do that. I need to be more involved in that opportunity. We need to share with one another. We need to be able to reach out and to be able to understand where people are coming from and what happened to each of us and how we got here. Now, have there been changes in the church that are certainly good? Absolutely. I mean, the church at one point, we've shared 100 times, the church has hurt as many people as it has helped. Because we've decided to point that finger and go, all the problems of the church are that group. And that's just wrong. Or all the problems of the church are those people or that person. And that's wrong. I just performed a wedding. A young girl had a tremendous faith, and I shared this, I think, last week, and I said she was just awesome in it, and yet she was probably the first individual that I wasn't sure I was going to do their wedding. Because she really, really had been turned off by the church. Why? Because she got pregnant before she got married. And her church said, I don't want anything to do with you. Big church. The blessing was that before we finished, her wedding vows included praying for her husband. What have we given away to satisfy the moment? Pieces of such things that are so essential to the Christian faith that we didn't even realize it. Guilty as charged at times. Being the non-liturgical guy I am, wanting to throw out everything because I was bored by the liturgy as a young man. And yet not realizing, because no one ever passed on to me exactly why the liturgy was the liturgy. Now, don't get excited for all you liturgical folks out there. I think I'm going to jump back into liturgy, 100%. But what can you see in your life that the church has given away? Do you know what's scary? You want to know who the groups are that are the most faithful and understanding and live their faith? The Mormon Church is number one. Orthodox Jews and Black Protestants. Pretty much in that order. The rest of us fall somewhere way down the line. The difference is because one generation makes sure the next generation understands why. So Douglas John Hall's quoted in the book, and he says this, he says, I am not very much worried about the reduction in numbers where Christianity is concerned. I am far more concerned about the qualitative factor. What kind of Christianity are we talking about? It's kind of scary. What kind? So each week we're going to dig into this a little deeper, and we're going to look at maybe how we got to where we are a little bit. But then in the end, the good news is it isn't all over. It's not the end of the world, as much as it seems a little depressing at first. There are steps and there are places the church can go, and it begins with each and every one of us. So this week I'm challenging each and every one of us to begin looking at our Christianity. In reality, I said, are you a Christian or are you a church person? And maybe you don't even know what it means to be a Christian yet, and that's going to fall on part of me, part of us in our teaching. Look at your Christianity and see how it compares. If you grew up in Christianity, what's it look like compared to that of your parents? For those of you who've been away from the church and maybe have come back, look at what drove you away from the church and see what has changed and what is not, and if it's good or if it's bad. Our Sunday night group, our Living United Methodist, our Living Christian United Methodist, the tradition group, we've really challenged that. We've looked at every denomination that we could look at and compare it right to United Methodism and see what we like and what we don't like, and maybe where things become unbiblical and that not all things are good. I want you to look at the changes you've experienced in the church and try to decide, are they biblical? Are they good things? said, have we moved the right direction in some of them? We have moved the right direction in a lot of things. We really have. But in that, we sometimes are in a hurry to get to the red stew because it's uncomfortable explaining where we are. Do the changes in the church, in your experience, do they glorify God? Or do they create convenience for people? Now, not being convenient necessarily means it's unchristian. Now, in the coming weeks, we're going to look closely at whether or not even the church still matters. Dean actually writes an entire section of the book on, does the church matter anymore? Speaking with Verna, our certified lay minister, her training and her update for this past week was about the future of the church. 2050, United Methodist Church is saying in their training, 2050, the church as we know it anywhere will rarely exist. Rarely exist. 2050. Not sure I'm going to get there, but my kids will. And then, as I said, we're going to close the series, and we're going to look then for where God is in all of this. That it's not too late. That it can come through. And one of the things, and she spends a lot of time, and we'll close this out, with an art of translation. You know, that fact that I don't understand liturgy, it didn't get translated to me, what it meant and how it fit in. Who's supposed to translate? Well, we go back to the societies. If we were Native Americans, the chiefs, to the medicine men, down the line. Instead, we've reached the point that, according to the youth, they don't see any difference in the older, middle-aged, and young folks in the church as anyone else. There'll be a term that you're going to hear if you don't read the book and you pick it up. Moral therapeutic deism. It means you do good things, it feels good, and there is a God, but he just kind of is only there when I need him. I only go to God when I need something. You've also heard me call it a Santa Claus God. Otherwise, God just sits back and watches. Now, that may be what you believe. But I'm going to tell you, by the time we're finished, you're going to realize it's not biblical. It doesn't come through Christian. It comes through Christianish. And those things we will talk through. One of the other things is the art of testimony. Being able to share what we believe. And you go, but Rick, I can't share what I believe because it's politically incorrect for today. Sounds to me like you want the red stew to be comfortable now and give up the ultimate birthright of the future. And then being able to make plans. I think we make plans about this big for a God who is infinite. We've got to stop making baby plans for an infinite God. And sometimes that creates challenge. So today, begin thinking, am I Christian or Christianish? It really does matter. By next week, you should sort of have an idea. If not this, you should have some questions. And if you're on the Facebook book group, put it out there and ask questions out in the Facebook group. If not, send them to me. And we can either work them back and forth, or if you want me to throw them out and talk to the group, then we will. But the question is, what do you love so much, like Esau? At that moment, what is it that makes you so happy today that you would give up the long term? That you would give up the absolute greatest birthright that you could ever have? And that is a relationship with a God through Jesus Christ who says, now and forever. What are you willing to give up to satisfy your appetite today? Amen.